Hey everybody and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell and this is the Ingrain Workshop. The drill press table that we built in the previous video was a solid start, but today we're taking it up a notch, adding tool storage, updraft and downdraft dust collection, adjustable stops, and extending the crank and the handle to the front of the table for a setup that's way more user-friendly. That's coming up next here at the Ingrain Workshop. I'm starting off by building the drawer and air plenum cabinet. At the table saw, I'll rip some 3/4 inch plywood to a width of 3.5 inches. That'll make up the two sides and the back. Over at the miter saw, I'll square up one end, then using my stop block for consistency, I'll cut the sides to 14 3/4 inches and the back to 12 11/16. Back at the table saw, with the blade set to a height of 3/8 of an inch, I'll cut a 1/4 inch groove 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom on both sides and the back. Using the miter gauge, I'll cut a 3/4 inch rabbet on one end of each side, since there's no front to the cabinet. The drawer front will serve as the cabinet front later on. I could have swapped out to a dado stack, but for just a couple of rabbets it wasn't worth it, plus I am using a flat bottom blade. Next, I'll cut a 3/4 inch dado in both sides about 3 inches from the back. That'll hold the partition that creates the downdraft air plenum. Using 3/4 inch plywood again, I'll cut the bottom to 12 5/8 by 14 5/16. Both the rip and the cross cut are done here at the table saw. Then from a 1/4 inch plywood, I'll cut the top panel about 10 inches by 14 5/16. With the blade height set to 1/2 inch, I'll cut a 3/4 inch wide rabbet on 3 sides of the bottom panel, creating a 1/4 inch tongue to fit into the grooves on the sides and backs. At this point I decided I didn't love that joinery, so I adjusted it. I reduced the rabbets on the sides and back down to 1/4 inch. With the piece held vertically against the fence set to 3/8 and the blade set at a height of 3/4 inch, I recut the 3/4 inch rabbet on the sides and back. Sometimes you gotta design on the fly. And also, I needed to mount the cabinet under the drill press table with access from below to install the drawer slides, so I trimmed off the 1/4 inch tongue I'd cut earlier. Finally, I added a 3/4 inch dado in the back and the dividing partition to reduce the air plenum size and improve airflow efficiency. With that, all the cabinet parts are done and I can move on to the drawer. For the drawer, I'm using 1/2 inch plywood. I'll rip the sides, front, and back to 2 3/8 inches wide. Over at the miter saw, I'll cut the sides to 10 inches and the front and back to 9 7/8, allowing a 1/2 inch clearance on each side for the drawer slides. Back at the table saw, using the miter gauge, I'll cut 1/2 inch rabbets 1/4 inch deep on the ends of both sides. For the bottom, I'll use 1/4 inch plywood cut to 9 15/16 by 8 inches. Then I'll cut a groove 1/4 inch halfway up from the bottom on all 4 sides to accept the bottom panel. And with that, all the parts for the drawer are complete. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and make the drawer cavity. The drawer cavity consists of the drawer cavity itself for the drawer, and then I've got a return air plenum built in here in the back. I'm going to take this 2-inch coupling and cut it off with a hacksaw and then mount the coupling on the inside of the back, and then I'll hook my air hose up, or my vacuum hose up to the back of it, and then that's how I'll draw the air from the bottom of the insert. And then the drawer itself will just sit inside the cavity. I'll go ahead and mount 2 drawer slides, and then I've got a dust cover or dust lid which will keep the dust from falling inside the drawer compartment. And then to be able to access the dust collection point, which is in the top of the table, the way I designed the insert is it's not in center with the drill chuck. It's offset So I took the largest Forstner bit that I had, which was 2 1/4 inches, and mounted it so the very top would be at the very edge of my largest bit. So now I can take my insert and then just rotate it whenever I drill through it, and I can just rotate it 360 degrees until it's all chewed up, and then I can pull out the insert, flip it upside down, and work on the back side. I think that's a lot more efficient rather than having a square or rectangular insert. I think you'll get more use out of a round insert versus a square or rectangular one. The other plus to this is, since it's offset, I can now drill a 1 inch Forstner bit hole right here in the middle. That 1 inch hole will be the dust access point for the table underneath. So I'll take and cut out the bottom of the table so airflow can go from this air plenum in the back and suck it from the center of the insert, so it will draw air. So I've got a 2-point dust collection system. One is going to be in the drill table from the center of the insert, and then I'm going to have one that's going to be over the fence on the exterior. So I'll have 2 accesses that I'll be collecting dust from, which I think will be pretty efficient. As far as the drawer cavity goes, again, I've got a 1/4 inch piece of plywood for the top, which just keeps the dust out of the drawer. And then the drawer cavity itself is made from 3/4 inch plywood. And I've cut a 3/4 inch rabbet on the bottom of the sides and the back. And then I've cut a 1/4 inch rabbet at the top of both sides and the back. And then I've cut a 3/4 inch dado here for the dividing partitions, which separate the drawer compartment from the dust collection compartment or the plenum. So that's pretty much the construction for the drawer cavity. Then the drawer itself is all made out of just 1/2 inch plywood. The sides have 1/4 inch rabbets cut on either end, and a 1/2 inch rabbet on either end, and then a 1/4 inch groove for the bottom of the drawer. So it's pretty simple construction. The joinery is not that difficult to do. So now let's go ahead and glue everything up. Before I can glue up the drawer cabinet, I need to drill the hole for the dust port. It's a 2-inch hole, and this was a great excuse to try out my new drill press table, and those F-clamp slots really came in handy for holding everything in place. With the dust port cut into the back, I'll drill a few pocket holes in the tops of the sides and back. This will allow me to mount the drawer cabinet securely to the underside of the drill press table. Now it's time for the glue up. I'll shoot in a few brad nails just to hold everything together while the glue dries. With the drawer cabinet assembled, I can route the dust groove on the underside of the drill press table. For this, I'm using a few pieces of scrap plywood with nice straight edges, held in place with some double-sided tape, tacked as a guide for my flush trim bit bearing. I'll make the cut in 3 passes, taking about 1/4 inch off at a time until I reach the full depth. Finally, I'll glue up the drawer the same way as before. Glue at the joints and a few brad nails to hold it square, and that's another piece ready for assembly. So now with the drawer and the drawer cavity, for the most part glued together, I still haven't glued the base on to the cavity because I need that off in order to drill the pocket holes to fasten the drawer cavity to the actual top, and I haven't done that yet. But I just wanted you to kind of visualize what's going on here. I've got my drawer. I'm waiting on my drawer slides, but once I get those, I'll install the slides onto the drawer cavity in the drawer, and this will slide out. Now it will sit flush. It's 3/4 inch back, and what I'll do is I'll come in here with a cherry face and put a drawer front on it that matches the cherry edge banding. I think that'll really clean it up, make it look nice. I'll put a knob on it so I can slide this drawer in and out. Now, as far as the template or the drill backing insert goes, you can now see the hole that I created with the router, and this goes into my suction or air plenum. So now I can draw down from the dust that's released from the insert. So I'm going to take and drill a hole, 1-inch diameter hole, straight through the insert, and that'll be my dust collection port for the downdraft of the table, and then that will suck it through this groove and out the back of the air plenum and out of the back of the drawer cavity. I'm also going to make a dust collection for above the table. I'll do that later. But so the drawer cavity acts as a, has two purposes: the actual drawer itself for tool storage, and then actual dust collection. So that's where I'm at right now. The next thing I'll do is install the drawer slides. Okay, so that was past Rick, who didn't realize there'd be an Amazon glitch delaying the drawer slides. But hey, the show must go on. I decided to move ahead and make the drawer front from a piece of curly cherry I had on hand. At the miter saw, I rough cut the piece I needed, then headed back over to the planer to mill it down to 3/4 of an inch thick. Back at the table saw, using my joiner jig, I ripped one straight edge, then flipped it and ripped it to the final width of 3.5 inches. Over at the miter saw, I trimmed off any planer snipe and cut it to a final length of 13 inches. After a quick test fit, everything looked good. Those cut off pieces with the snipe, I'll save those. They'll make great stops later in the build. To finish up, I'll add a little punch to the drawer front by routing a 1/2 inch roundover around the perimeter, then give it a good sanding to bring out the curly cherry grain. Now it's time to work on the crank. I'll start by removing the crank handle with a Phillips head screwdriver. Then, using a set of calipers, I measured the crank shaft. It came out to 12 millimeters. Unfortunately, this is where I had a senior moment. I accidentally measured the column lock handle, which was 14 millimeters. Then I went ahead and ordered two 14 millimeter by 24 inch shafts and a set of miter gears with a 14 millimeter bore. Yeah, idiot move. I wouldn't realize the mistake until it was time to install the miter gears on the crankshaft. Getting old sucks. So I decided to reuse my original column lock handle. I started by drilling out the factory pin to separate the handle from the threaded bolt. To make the extension shaft, I cut a slit down the middle of the 14 millimeter rod using an angle grinder and a vise to hold it steady. Then over at the drill press, I drilled a 3/16 inch hole perpendicular to that slot. On the opposite end of the shaft, where the handle will attach, I grind a flat surface on both sides so it would fit perfectly. I drilled another 3/16 inch hole on that end as well. Next, I cut a short piece of 3/16 inch steel rod about 3/4 of an inch long and chucked it up in the drill, and then over at the belt sander I chamfered both ends of the pin. With everything prepped, I inserted the pin and, using my vise and ball peen hammer, seated it in place on both sides, making sure everything moved smoothly and worked like it should. I'm using a laser to locate where I need to drill the hole for the locking handle extension. With the laser centered on the threaded end of the lock, I'll measure down from the bottom of the drill press table to get an accurate position. I'll repeat the same process for the crank. The laser also helps me center both the drill press table and the drawer cabinet with the drill press itself, so I can mark out the mounting hole slots on the underside of the table and the top of the cabinet. Once the drawer cabinet is fastened to the table with pocket hole screws, I can now install the drawer slides to the side of the cabinet and then to the side of the drawers. Next, I can drill and install the threaded inserts that will be used to mount the table to the drill press. I'll use some mold thread and knobs for easy adjustment and removal later on. With the locking handle extension finished, I can move on to the crank extension. I went back and ordered another set of miter gears, this time with a 12 millimeter bore to fit the actual crankshaft. I'll mount the 12 millimeter gear to the drill press crankshaft and the 14 millimeter bore gear to the crank extension. The gears come with a keyway slot, so I ordered an assortment of keys and found one that fits snugly. The key sits against the flat portion of the crankshaft and is locked down with a set screw. Once everything's aligned, I'll tighten the screw to hold the gear in place. For the gear on the crank extension, I grind a flat spot on the end of the shaft to fit the key. I also grind a flat spot on the opposite end so I can install the new handle. Back at the table saw, I'll cut out the extension rod supports from 3/4 inch plywood and finishing the profiles over at the miter saw. Using a 1/2 inch Forstner bit at the drill press, I'll drill out the holes for the extensions based on the laser measurements I took earlier. Then I'll soften all edges with an 1/8 inch roundover bit in the trim router. At my pocket hole workstation, I'll drill out the holes I'll use to mount the extension rod support to the bottom of the table. With the laser set up to position everything accurately, I'll glue and support it in place with pocket hole screws. Next, I'll install the drawer front. A little double-sided tape and a few playing cards help keep the spacing even from the bottom of the table. Once aligned, I'll pull the drawer out and secure the front with a couple of screws from the inside. Since it's a small drawer, I had to use my right angle drill attachment for this one. Then I'll add a knob right in the center and make sure everything slides smoothly. Moving to the other side of the drill press, I'll use the laser again to line up the crank extension supports. I'll have 2 supports here, one at the back and one at the front. After cutting them to size and finishing the profiles, I'll drill the same 1/2 inch holes and pocket holes and soften all the edges with the trim router. To install the back support, I'll shoot in a few brad nails through the rear of the drawer cabinet. You might remember this back right corner is where we added a partition to make the air plenum smaller, so this space was basically dead anyway. Then I'll lock it down with pocket hole screws. Now you can really start to see how the miter gears will work. I'll slide on a 14mm collar at both the front and back supports. These lock in place with set screws and keep the extension rod from moving in and out so the gears stay perfectly meshed. Once the front support is aligned with the laser, I'll secure it with pocket hole screws and install the handle. And just like that, we can now adjust the drill press table height right from the front. That's a major upgrade. Now it's time to make some match grain adjustable stops. I cut and sanded my snipe scraps to size. Then over at the drill press, I drilled a 5/16 inch hole for the T-bolt. At the router table, I ran an 1/8 inch chamfer along the bottom and inside edge. That gives the dust somewhere to go. Then I cleaned up the rest of the edges with an 1/8 inch roundover bit in the trim router. After a quick coat of poly, I mounted them to the fence using a T-bolt and knob. And boom, match grain adjustable stops. Definitely overkill for shop furniture. But hey, that's how we roll. And it's those little details that really upset the supervisor. Next, I cut out the support for the updraft dust collection. I drilled a 2-inch hole and rounded all the corners with an 1/8 inch roundover bit. Using a positive stop clamped to the bottom of the table, I pre-drilled and secured it with 1.5 inch screws to mount the support to the back of the table. Coming off my 4-inch blast gate, I used a 4x2 reducer and a 2-inch Y to hook up some 2-inch flex hose with band clamps. The bottom hose runs to the dust port on the drill press table, and the top hose connects the updraft dust pipe. A quick test run shows that both the down and upward dust collection are working perfectly. And just like that, mission accomplished. Well, that wraps up this upgrade to the drill press table, and I have to say, this setup is turning into one serious piece of shop furniture. Let's start with the new tool storage drawer. It's compact, but it keeps the bits, wrenches, and accessories right where I need them. No more digging through drawers on the other side of the shop. The table crank extension up front, paired with those miter gears, is a total game changer. Now I can raise and lower the table from the front instead of reaching around the column every time. Same goes for the locking handle extension on the side. Quick access and no more awkward leaning. The top of the table has F-clamp slots built right in, making it easy to secure awkward pieces without blocking the work area. And to give it a finished look, I wrapped the table and fence with cherry edge banding, just a little touch of class to dress up the shop. The T-track system gives full adjustability. One track in the table for sliding the fence, and the other in the fence itself for those match grain adjustable stops. Yeah, that might be overkill, but hey, that's kind of my thing. The rounded replaceable insert in the center not only protects the bits, but also ties into the built-in downdraft dust collection, which keeps chips from piling up on the table. And the updraft dust collection over the fence really pulls in the fine stuff right where it was created. So cleanup is faster and visibility is better. And finally, the finishing touch, that magnetic tool tray from Harbor Freight. It's simple, but it holds all the go-to tools within reach. and that makes the workflow smooth. Altogether, this drill press table now has everything I could ask for. Storage, precision, dust control, and ease of use, all dialed in. Thanks for following along on this build. In the next video, I'll be giving a full shop tour, so make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell so you don't miss it. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope the video kind of gives you some ideas on how you can build your own drill press table, from the table to the fence, to the Harbor Freight magnetic storage, to the upward and downward dust collection, to the tool storage, to the crank in the front and the lock on the back. That setup makes this way more user-friendly than having to reach underneath the table to make those adjustments. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all my existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you give this channel. Now, I'll leave links in the video description below to all the tools and equipment that I used on this build, and that's one way you can support the channel. And if you're really feeling generous, you can always leave us a super thanks. We greatly appreciate it. And I'll also leave links to the previous videos of how to build the table and the fence and how to actually restore the drill press, which, by the way, I've had longer than the supervisor. I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.